Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. Uh, this is my final stream, my final technical art stream. I'm Gian Paolo, director of Destiny Bit. This is going to be the last stream in a while. I had a great deal of fun doing these. It's sort of like a new format for me. We streamed a lot the development of our previous game, and it was in a different way. It was pretty much 2 or 3 times a week, showing what it's active in development. I found that to be pretty taxing. Always, I was always finding myself sort of like in a need to perform and in a need to show good stuff and fun stuff about the development of the game. Over here, it's much more focused. I can just show cool stuff. I can just show cool solutions. And these streams can actually be perhaps useful to some people, to some developers out there who are trying to make some cool effects, some interesting effects. So hopefully they also bring some good in the world. On my end, I would like to apologize in advance if I am not as sharp as usual. It's been a very long week. I am fairly tired, so I feel like I am at the sort of like limit of my mental abilities. But still, I'm gonna power on, and I'm gonna do my best to show you some of the cool things and cool tricks we're doing in Dice Legacy. If you don't know what Dice Legacy is an old school. No, sorry, that was the intro for the last game. See, Dice Legacy is a city builder, completely powered by dice, set in a ring world. And being set in a ring world means that there are some interesting solutions that we had to find to some interesting problems, like how do we do fog? How do we do volumetric effects for like clouds and fog of war and stuff like that? So what I want to show you today is particularly the fog of war and the fog itself, and some other fake volumetric effects. So I'm going to switch here to the engine. I have the game running, and hopefully everything is okay in terms of video and audio. But the 2 main effects that I want to talk about today are this fog of war right here, which is very puffy. Now, there is something awkward going on in Unreal that I still don't understand fully. This is supposed to have volumetric shadow, like either, I don't remember exactly what the name of the setting is, like volumetric self shadow or stuff like that. But it looks very bright until I do something, like for example, say placing a house, or there are a few things, like for example moving the camera sometimes does it. But basically, if I force an update on it in some capacity, this will start to render differently, and it will appear. Yeah, there we go. I think now it's doing it properly. It appears more natural in its shading. Tank 911. I don't know if it's laggy. Please let me know. I have reduced the bitrate since the last stream because I think my connection struggles with big bulks of data. So I just reduced it a little bit. It should be better now. Maybe I had a little bit of downtime, or something, just a little bit of lag. Anyway, so as you can see, this effect looks pretty puffy, looks pretty cool, and this is the kind of, it's gonna be the star of the show for the stream. How we did this, and all the failures that went into making this, because we failed a bunch in finding how to do this fog of war properly. To be honest with you, I still see things that could be improved with this fog of war. And just to show you how it works, if I place a storage here and I build it, I'm gonna speed up the time significantly by cheating. There we go. You can see that I can explore into the fog of war, and the fog of war gets eaten away, which is a pretty cool effect. So the other also, the other effect that I want to show you today is this actual fog. As you can see, like, the sides of the screen are sort of like yellowish. If I actually disable the fog of war, you can see here that there are yellowish... Let me disable the UI as well. You can see that there are yellowish corners, and you can see that there's some smoke going on. There's just some atmospheric effects going on. This is actually a sort of like a fog effect, but it happens on a cylinder instead of happening, you know, regularly with a atmospheric fog or with some other kind of built-in fog that Unreal has. And over here, it gets purplish. It gets, you know, we also change the color depending on our location on the ring in order to make it more or less. It depends on the kind of atmosphere that we want to build. If I detach myself and I look at the ring from afar, you can see that the fog is actually perceivable. And you can see that in the dark side of the ring where the sun doesn't shine, it's much more evident and it's much more apparent what is going on. But nonetheless, I will now show you how the ring itself, the fog for the ring itself has been achieved. I'm going to start with the fog because it's the easiest of the two effects, and then I'm going to move on to the fog of war, which is a much more complex implementation of the same idea. So, I'm going to open the material for the fog. So, well, no. I'm going to stop everything because the fog is present also when the game is not running. So you can see that the fog is still here. So I don't have to do anything too fancy. I can just show it to you from here. So you can see that our base world generator object has a bunch of children. One of these is the fog cylinder. Now, this is still sort of like, I still call it test. This, you know, I usually drop the test name after a while if I'm sure of what I'm doing. But this is how it looks like. And it's actually pretty easy. If I had to redo this, like, this is sort of like a dated version of the Fog of War. Well, not a dated version, but like a dated approach. If I had to redo it, I would redo it in a slightly different way, and I will show you how. But essentially, what this is, it's nothing more than just a few cylinders, just one inside the other. You can see that there are actually 3 layers to this. You know, I don't know if you can tell, but they're like 3 slices, right? So these are 3... basically circles that are just one inside of the other, right? And the material that is applied on them is called cylindrical fog. And it's actually very, very simple, right? Let me show you how these are unwrapped. I am doing the same trick that I'm doing for the ring, where basically I split this in half and I put half on one side and the other half on the other side. Here I have a bunch of textures. And I'm going to show you exactly what is happening here. So, what is fog normally? So, normally fog, it's achieved through something like fog. Atmospheric fog, exponential height fog. Essentially what it does is affects how, I guess, pixels or vertices, I guess, depending on the implementation of the fog, are rendered in color and blends in a color in a distance, so that to give the illusion that there is a fog present. So, for example, let's say that you make an orange fog. Stuff that is very, very far away from the camera is going to look very orangish, but stuff that is very close to the camera is not going to look orange at all. So Unreal has, out of the box, 2 different tools that you can use, atmospheric fog and exponential height fog. Both of them are really made if you have a plane. If you have a plane, if you have a city, if you have, you know, something traditional, it's going to work out. But if you're doing something crazier, like we are, it's not going to work out. So, essentially, the only thing that we wanted to achieve is simply just to color stuff that is further away, right? So we just wanted to add a little bit of wispiness, a little bit of fogginess to things that are far away. So the way we did it is just simply we put in 3 big rings of you know, just 3 meshes, and the material is a translucent material. is set to unlit, of course. I don't think it's set to additive. No, it's not, because otherwise it would be additive here. But what it's essentially doing is just adding color on it, you know, and I am modulating the opacity. We use a lot... where is it? Depth fade. Where is depth fade? There we go. We use depth fade. Depth fade essentially is a way for Unreal to tap into the depth buffer to essentially tell the material how close you are, how close the material is to, well, how, yeah, it basically tells the material if it's close or inside of other stuff in the depth buffer. So you don't know what you're, you know, what you're touching or what you're about to touch. It's all based on distance. So essentially what I'm doing here is I am getting a gradient based on the distance of 400. I'm going to try to show you this in pieces so you can maybe understand what is going on. So I am... The first thing that I'm going to show you here is what is happening. So in terms of color, it's pretty easy. It's just a color, right? It's just a color. We're not doing anything fancy with it. It's just a color. Everything that is happening, it's in the opacity and in the warp position offset. In the opacity, I am simply modulating the opacity in a way so that I can get, you know, a fade out on the edges of the fog, so that when you look at the world, you can see this stuff right here, right? So that the fog kind of disappears, like if it wasn't the atmosphere of a planet. You know, if you look at the Earth, or if you look at any other planet with an atmosphere, so I guess Earth. If you look at Earth, well, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to understand this. But if you look at Earth, you know, from space, you will see that it has this sort of like halo effect around it, which is the Earth atmosphere. And over here, I am simulating the same thing with this fade out. And this fade out is done simply via a texture. So pretty simple stuff. I am multiplying it by the depth fade. So I'm just fading depending on the distance. And I'm, you know, adding or subtracting. You know, I'm taking the fog opacity, multiplying it by 1.2. I'm not exactly sure why it is. Oh, yeah. On the winter, I am making the fog thicker. Just to give a little bit of the more cold feel. But yeah, essentially I'm just modulating the opacity, and the start of the show is the depth fade. The depth fade is what makes the effect possible. Now, the way we hide the fog and the way we do the wind and everything else is just by panning a texture on it. So you can tell that it's slowly moving. Just by panning a texture on it, I'm just using the red channel, so it looks something like this. Real time. There we go. So you can tell that it's moving very, very slowly. I don't care very much if you can see the repeating pattern of the texture. I don't care very much because this is going to be a very faint effect. So you will never be able to tell that this texture is not random enough. And what I'm doing here, same for nodes as the last time. Absolute warp position, normalize, multiply. Multiplying it by the red channel. I'm doing a power node simply to get a more harsh gradient on it. Just essentially similar to doing like a curves effect in Photoshop. And I am adding... so this is how, you know, this is how the fog just gets wispy. And if I had to simply show you this, it would look something like this. Right? So this is the fog effect without anything fancy applied to it. But the thing that I didn't like is... Now, this game... The camera from this game is always from the top, right? But I like to take screenshots. And I like to, you know, go up and personal with things and see how they look from up close. And maybe we'll do a cutscene. And maybe we'll do something else, right? So I wanted this fog to work from every camera perspective. Even if you went, you know, down close to the ground to look at things. So right here, it doesn't look super pretty. You're in the middle of the fog of war and it looks weird. This is not how, sorry, not fog of war, just in the middle of the fog. This is not how fog would look if this was, you know, a regular Unreal fog. It would be totally transparent here and it would be more opaque back there, right? So I wanted to do something to make the fog less visible here. But I didn't want to mess with opacity because you could still see sort of like the slithers, the 3 different layers of this circle. You could still see them, but instead of starting from like here, right, you can see that there's something weird going on. They would start from there, right? And just so you know, this doesn't have a lot of geometry. It has a little bit, but not a lot. You know, it's not anything crazy. I believe if I open the mesh, I'll be able to tell you. 12,000 triangles. You know, it's not a lot. It's okay for just a static mesh. Doesn't do anything unlit. It's pretty okay. So what I am doing is this, basically. So I am doing exactly the same effect, you know, the absolute world position, normalize, multiply by a distance, but I am doing a sphere mask based on the camera position with a pretty generous radius. So what this does is this creates a sphere based on the camera position. If I can show you how this works, I'm going to completely disable this, completely disable this, and completely disable this. I think I can show you just this. And I can show you how this works. So this is how it works. It creates a sphere. And the center of the sphere is the camera position. And the radius of the sphere is very, very high. It's like 5,000 something. So you can see that if I'm all the way over here, I'm not messing with it at all. But if I get close to it, you can see that the circle starts to appear. And I get this effect that essentially gives me a nice fade, depending on where the camera position is. And then essentially what I'm doing is I'm simply taking the circle and pushing it down in the direction of the normal of the ring, pushing it down based on this circle. So when you combine it, I'm just gonna keep the. Well, I'm just gonna show you this. I'm just gonna show you this. I'm gonna put, say, like a 1 in the emissive, so you can see what's going on. And this is how it looks like. So I have a ring, right? If I get close to this ring, you can see that the ring is actually moving downwards, right? Because whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Sorry. But if I do like a wireframe, you can see that the mesh is changing its shape. Like, look at this curve. If I move close to it, you can see that it's starting to go down, right? If I get close to it, get close to it, get close to it, you know, it starts to run away from me. At one point, it stops, but it's starting to run away from me, right? So if I go back to the lit version, you can see that I achieve this effect where I am cutting into the fog, just like a regular fog would. And this is just very, very simple, but allows me to do what a regular fog would do. And it's, I would say that it's a pretty brute forcey way to do fog. But it works. So it works for us. It works for our game. We don't have any particular, you know, performance constraints. So if I reattach opacity, emissive color, and everything else, I get this fog. And if I'm very close to the ground, you can see that I don't see the fog at all. I see some wisps all the way over there. But when you have forest, when you have grass and everything else, you don't really notice them. You don't really notice any like geometry in it. It's just seamless. So it just works. And I think this is pretty cool. And I think this fog effect works. Now, in terms of performance, doing these multiple circles thingies means that you are actually overdrawing multiple times, because for each one of these cylinders, you have to draw on top of the previous one. So it might be a little bit of expensive. So if I show you like the shader complexity, you will notice that there is a bunch of overdraw happening. It's not a lot and it's not too crazy. Like if I look at like when there's only one layer showing, you can see that it's pretty low in terms of cost. And if when all three are showing, the jump is not very high. This is still an unlit material. There's still not a lot going on in the shader. So it's okay, right? When it overlaps like the sea, it gets messy because I am overlapping the fog with another translucent material, which is also pretty complex and stuff like that. So it might be a little bit crazy there. But it works. And as you can see, if I hit play, this is still gonna be bad based on the pixels that I do this on, since pixel shader, overdrawing, all of that. So if I'm not drawing many of these pixels, it's not gonna be as bad. So this fog, like I said, gets mostly hidden when it's underneath me, and it gets mostly shown when it's far away from me. So right now it's really only fogging a little bit the top right corner and top left corner. So if I do this, you can see that I get some cost, obviously, for it, but I tend to get it like in, let's say, like 25 to 30% of the screen, something like that. So it's not too much, right? So it's, I would say it's a nice trade-off. It's acceptable, and it's pretty cool. Now, to the start of the show, the Fog of War. So I am pretty happy with how the Fog of War looks right now. Like I said, it's wispy, it's cool, and the idea of the Fog of War is to hide what lies in front of you, right? The Fog of War went through many iterations. The thing about the Fog of War is that, unlike the fog, it is interactable. So it needs to read where it needs to draw, and when it needs to be drawn, and when it, needs to hide. So we tried many different things to feed these kinds of informations to the Fog of War. So if I open the Fog of War material, well, go back to lit. Yeah, there we go. See, this is how it looks normally. But for some reason, sometimes it looks very bright, and then it looks fine, and then it looks fine forever. This is something that I will probably have to look into with some folks at Epic, just to try to understand what's going on. But anyway, I like how wispy it looks. I was really trying to get something that resembled clouds, but just like 3D clouds. So I am going to open up the material for it. So first of all, I'm going to show you the mesh. And the mesh is actually, as you can see, pretty similar to what the cylinder mesh looks like. Sorry, the fog mesh looks like. But it's just kind of half of the circle. It's not all of the circle, because we don't need all of the circle for this one, because we know that the Fog of War is going to be limited to only the portion where the player can actually look at. So, this is more than enough. The second thing different that we did from the fog is that we adopted the same approach that we used for clouds, which is basically we have multiple overlapping meshes. Like, they're actually overlapping, and they have different amounts of, like, different colors in terms of vertex color. So they go from all the way red to all the way black, and everything in between, so that I can then use those 4 nodes that I showed you before. Absolute warp position, normalized, times a vector 3, to bring them forward towards the center of the world, or bring them backwards towards behind the ring. So this is how it looks like. It's pretty awkward to look at like this, but if I show you the material, so you will see that I have a material instance. The reason why I did a material instance is simply because it took a while to fine-tune the material, and simply so I just used a material instance, which is very, very useful to not go back and to do the edits on the actual master material, quote unquote. This is just a nice tip. You can always adjust this stuff, and it will always update in real time. Can you do underwater effects like coral or maybe schools of fish with the same layered cylinders? It is possible, yes. I think that just thinking about it, I think that corals would be kind of weird. Corals would probably be better as just things that are actually attached to the terrain. But schools of fish would totally be doable. Obviously, the effect would break if you look at it from up close, but it would work from all the way up there. But for fish, it might just be worth it to do particle systems with random fish moving around. That might be better. There's also fishing is not a thing in the game. So if there's fish and you can't fish, it might look weird to the player. So, but corals could be a cool thing. I still think that this part of the world right here needs some love. So it might be some improvements that we do in the future. I look at the sea and I don't like it. I hate it. I used to love it. You know, after I was done with this material, I was like, oh my god, I made the best sea. And then I look at it again. It's like, this is trash. I'm trash. But I'll get back to it and make it better before the release. I hope. Anyway, back to the fog. So you can see that there's a gajillion parameters. So let me go into the fog. All right. So the material itself is not too crazy, actually. It used to be much, much crazier. And all the way over here, there is some of the craziness that was going on in this material before. I don't remember what I was doing here. Oh, yes. I remember now. So, this game used to be different. Exploration in the Fog of War used to happen depending on, like, you could explore every single node. So you could explore, say, like, I could explore this forest right here, and it would reveal the stuff that was around that forest. And then I could explore, let's say, this hunting grounds over here, and it would explore that other portion. So it would all get eaten, you know, in these little chunks, these little bites. So the fog used to be very different. The fog used to be made with a very, very brute force material function that I made myself. That I think I can find. That is borderline panning texture. Hello, Gomi. Nice to see you. So, borderline panning texture was made to... So, everybody uses borderline textures in Unreal. It's a very fast way to do auto texturing, essentially, especially on terrain. So, borderline panning texture was made to have a texture that could pan around, and I edited it so that it would still kind of make sense. So you can see here that it's moving, right? And it's moving in this direction right here, but it's breaking over here, but it's working over here, and it's working over here. So it works on kind of half of the circle. It's pretty weird. But anyway, I was using this thing to do the Fog of War, but then I had the problem of eating the Fog of War away, right? So it used to be that the Fog of War was just an instant static mesh made with a gajillion hexagons. So, let me see if I can find a hexagon. There we go. So, it used to be made of a gajillion of these things. Oh, I still have the old material, by the way. So, I can show it to you. This is how the old material used to look like. It's more spaghetti than the other one. Sure. This is just some testing. But it was done completely differently. And it was done on a per hex basis, and we were just removing single hexes and removing instances. We were not removing instances of the instant static mesh. We were just scaling them to 0, just to avoid the cost of adding and removing things, and also just to not lose the index in the process. Anyway, just some finesse thingies. I see that the Subtract Explorer... Let me see where the Subtract Explorer is, because that's treat. I think there should be a custom function here somewhere. Where is it? Well, first of all, I was doing this stuff right here to take the X's at the edges and extend them all the way to the end of the ring, which was probably weird, but essentially I was doing some math just to take the edges and extend it. But then there should be a custom function here somewhere. And there's not, because I think this was like version 2 where it was not as crazy. But essentially version 1, like the very first version that we tried, was using a custom sort of like a custom HLSL piece of code that was reading from a texture. This texture was, let's say, 128 by 128, where every pixel was a color, of course, but every pixel represented a coordinate in the world. And we're essentially using this custom node to create not an infinite, but a variable amount of sphere masks for every hexagon that was eaten up. So we were creating just a gajillion of these to eat in the world. And needless to say, this was not a good approach. As soon as we tried it, it was too expensive. Like, way too expensive. I think I still have the code somewhere. This one? Yeah, I think this was the code, right? So essentially, we were sampling on a very small texture. This texture was being written from the outside, was being written by a render target. So we were taking every cell that we wanted, and we were feeding it to this texture. In every pixel, we put a position, essentially, in RGB. And we were reading it through here and creating a sphere. Oh, thank you, Gomi. Thank you, appreciate that. But as soon as we hit play, this tanked the performance of my 1080. So we quickly realized it wasn't the way to go. So we had to use a texture. But having to use a texture meant that we couldn't use... We had to get the proper mapping from the texture to the world. And that's where this node that I showed you last time sort of like was invented. It's like, okay, we need to take in any position in the world, we need to know where we are in a texture. So that's how we did it. If I go back to the newer Fog of War, so I can actually show you what we're doing right now, is we are warp position, subtract explored. There we go. So we're obviously subtracting the explored in the texture like I showed you last time. So basically we have a render target where we are placing a blue circle everywhere a cell was explored. So essentially these circles are being drawn in real time as the game happens. So they are eating into the texture as you explore and stuff like that. So we have a simple yes or no way to know if something is explored or not. So, pretty straightforward. But then, how do we do the wispiness? How do we do the cool effects? So, with this thing under my, or sort of like in my tool belt, I then went and just panned a bunch of textures. Since now I could, well, no, actually, I just did this for the subtraction. But everything else is just, regularly unwrapped. So we have one unwrapping that is just everything else. So on one half of the UV coordinates, I have half of the circle. On the other half, I have the other half. But for everything else, this is just completely unwrapped in one portion of the texture. I don't care. And it's just a pack. I just pan a bunch of textures over it. So I do some stuff in order to make it semi-random or just, not read as a pattern, which was very important. It was very important during the process of making this Fog of War that it didn't read as a pattern, as a repeating texture. So if I start to preview this node, let me set it to real time, you will see that I am essentially just blending these two textures, that they go like this. One goes, this way, one goes this way, and looks kind of weird. But if I then do it this way over here, start previewing node, you can see that I do it as well for two other nodes, and some go this way, some go this way, and it still kind of looks weird. But when you combine all of them, and especially when you do height lerp, HiLorp is a very, very cool node that I encourage you to check out if you especially have to do like terrain and blending and stuff like that. Essentially, it just takes a transition phase, like, you know, I have a 0 and 1 ramp, like a gradient, and I want to blend this gradient using the texture, and just to mess around the edges, like doing some dirty edges and stuff like that. And so I use this as a high texture, and as a transition phase, I use these two. So this is my transition phase, and this is my high texture. So the high texture is much more thin. And if I look at what this gives me, as you can see, it gives me this kind of weird effect, right? It's pretty interesting. I believe I am doing this. I'm employing the exact same technique that I'm using on the other side, where essentially the bulk of the opacity is just depth fade stuff, and the rest is just pushing the fog of war underneath the world so that I get that wispiness effect. But essentially, the fake volumetric effect comes from just stacking three or four rings together and just animating the same texture with various degrees of subtraction. So the higher I am in the texture, the higher I am subtracting, to give this illusion of depth. So if I show them to you up close, now it's starting to snow, but hopefully this still will work out. So you can see that, like, on the top, it's more wispy than at the bottom. And I have a bunch of parameters that I can touch. So I can maybe show you what these various things do. So I want to skip the winter. Sorry, but it's gonna mess with the visibility of this thing. All right, summer again. I have to pick a policy. All right. So let me start to mess with this. So for example, I can mess with the offsets. So for example, if I want a very tall fog of war, I could do let's do minus 400. Whoops. Look at how tall it got, right? Now, if it is very tall, you can sort of like see the trick. So this trick works for the kind of game we're making. And you can see that essentially volumetric stuff. Now, I'm not too smart and I'm very tired, so please excuse both of those things. But volumetric stuff is usually is done with ray marching and techniques where essentially you are just drawing something in slices, right? You're just taking something that should be 3D, you're dividing it in slices and just drawing those slices so that they give the illusion of 3D. And if you rotate these slices, they kind of always work. Over here, I'm not doing any slices, rotation, or anything like that, but I am doing this effect right here, which gives the illusion of wispiness and 3D and atmospheric stuff and volumetric stuff. So minus 400 is too much. So let me go back to, say, 250, which is more than what I had before, if I remember correctly. Min offset is minus 40, but I could go lower. So for example, I could go to 40. And so this would push everything down. Hello, Ben. How are you? Nice to see you. I want to see what you posted. Hopefully it's nothing that will get me in trouble. Oh my god. This brings back so many memories. Anyway, it's good to see you. Let me go back and set it to minus 40 again. Okay. I can control the opacity. I am actually controlling the opacity. So for example, subtract max tells me how much color I am subtracting at the top of the sort of like distribution, let's say. So if I do 1, you can see that now it's even more wispy. Now it's even like, now it resembles even more clouds. So I just put it to 0.6 because it's a value that I, just like. But I could put it to anything I want. So I could put it to, let's say 0.8, or I could put it to, say 0.2. And as you can see, like the fog is getting thicker or thinner, right? 0.2 is very thick. 0.6 is not as thick. 0.8 is, thinner, right? So there's a lot of stuff that I can do here. I can control the speed. So, for example, I can control the density, sort of like the density of the texture. So right now I have 6 and 4, which gives me these very big clouds. If I wanted smaller clouds, I could do, let's say, 12 and 8. But this gives me sort of like a fake effect that I'm not a fan of. Like, this feels very much like a noise texture, and I hate the look of a noise texture by itself. I think you should always try to hide your noise. So I'm going with these very, very big clouds. So I'm just going 6 and 4. And this gives this very natural look. The idea that I wanted to have is like this very thick fog that, is coming down towards you, fairly cinematic, fairly fantasy-ish, but yeah. Other stuff that I'm doing, I can control the contrast of the blending between the, in the height lerp. So I could do, I don't know, 2, and this gives me a very contrasty look. I can do 1, I can do 0.5, I can do 0.2, I can do 0.3. As you can see, any of these things that I'm doing contribute to make this effect work. I can control the depth fade. Obviously, I'm doing the depth fade both at the top and at the bottom. And this essentially is what, again, gives me the opacity effect. So if I have 0 and 0, you can see that it looks kind of trash. It looks, you can tell where the geometry is sort of like cutting into the world. But if I do something very high, let's say 400, and let's say, I don't know, 100, I get this very blended effect where, it's really working itself into the ground very seamlessly, right? I have a bunch of emissiveness. If I want to, I'm doing some Fresnel. So if I want to add a little bit of emissiveness, inside of the fog, so just to simulate like a light that comes through the fog, I could do it. So there's a bunch of things that I could do here. And they all contribute to this effect right here, which, once again, it's, again, at its core, very easy. It's simply multiple layers of this thing. One thing that I'm doing that is pretty cool, or am I doing it, or am I tripping? No, I am doing it. Yes, I am doing it. Where am I? Thinking. Yes, I am doing it. Yes. So, in order to avoid the repetition, I think if I do this, it will become evident that the texture is repeating. Let me see. Unless I'm mistaken. I'll tell you in a second, Gomi. I'm sorry. You missed the beginning of the stream where I said that I was very tired and at the absolute end of my mental capabilities for the week. So you'll have to excuse me. But I believe that this is all very uniform. But if I instead do this, it works. Yes. Okay. I will tell you what I'm doing. Yeah, now it looks more random. So, I told you that this is like slices of rings, right? What I wanted to avoid is the look that every ring has the same texture panning in the same direction, in the same boring way, and that everything looks kind of, like a repetition. So, I wanted to vary the texture mapping based on the ring that I was using. So, I am already coloring the ring differently, using the vertex color to offset them in the world differently. So, what I was doing is I am adding to the texture coordinates, I am simply adding 0.5, 0.5. So I'm essentially just shifting everything a little bit, depending on the red color of the vertex color. So the higher I am in this ring progression, so if I am on the surface ring, the texture is slightly offset from the bottom. So everything looks different depending on which layer I am on. And this contributes to this sense of randomness that this fog has, so that you can't really tell that I'm only using one texture. Because what I wanted to avoid is doing a gajillion texture samples and just using a gajillion textures to use the fog of war. And I'm only using one, but I had to randomize it in a smart way in order to read properly. In order for it to read properly. Oh, hold on. Hold on. I was editing the wrong one. Sorry. This is gonna be hilarious for people watching in the archive, because they're gonna be like, I don't care that you're tired. I'm watching this in 2022. You know, if we're gonna get to 2022, I'm watching to 2022. Why are you so rambly? And they're gonna write it in the comments. Are you writing in the comments? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm tired. On October 9th of 2020, I was tired. So yeah, there we go. Okay. Now I can show you exactly what I mean. So now it looks more samey. It looks like you can sort of like tell that everything is going in the same direction. You can tell that everything here is going this direction. You can tell that everything here is going this direction. And it looks pretty boring, right? So what I was doing is I was offsetting this. I'm going to close the other fog of words so that I don't get confused anymore. So I am offsetting this ever so slightly by 0.5, 0.5. Depending on the red color of the vertex color. So that I just offset it a little bit. I'm not using the same trick for speed. I'm just using it just to take the same fog of war texture mapping and just offsetting it a little bit, right? Because I wanted to use only one texture. And as you can see, I'm using the same texture here, 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 and here, right? I'm using different channels, but it's the same texture. I am also using a normal map. And the reason for the normal map is to give it a little bit more volume. Like I said, I am doing... this is set to volumetric directional because this wants to be somewhat lit. And it has... there we go. You saw that the lighting changed. I don't know exactly why it does it. I will investigate it. But... it has cast shadow turned on. And it has volumetric translucent shadow turned on, which gives it this much more realistic look. It looks much more realistic when this effect is working properly. And here it doesn't work, right? Here it works, and it looks a little bit more natural, and over here it looks a little bit more fake. I don't know exactly why it's happening, but I will investigate it. But anyway, the normal map helps with the shading. If the normal map wasn't there, it would look much more flatter. It would look just a bunch of sheets. But this normal map, I believe it was generated using... I think this is just a regular, let's say, rock texture. Or I don't know if I generated it off of the... I don't know if I generated it off of this. Yes, it looks like it. So I believe I used some channels of this texture to generate the normal map. But I don't really care that the two match. I don't care. I just want to give it some volume, right? I just want to give it some volume underneath. Because clouds aren't really like solids. They're gassy. So I just want to, give a little bit of this depth feel. But just faking it. So I have normal maps. I have 4 different textures that are panning. I'm doing my height lerp. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. Again, I'm using the vertex color to subtract different amounts of color. I'm using it to control the depth fade and all of that. The waves are very, very simple. Again, I'm pushing down based on the warp position. And I'm using the same old textures to just push them down into the world. And I'm subtracting the explored using one channel of the effects texture that I showed you last time. And that's pretty much it. And for the emissive, I do this effect right here, where essentially I take a Fresnel, and I'm gonna preview it. So, hold on. So this is what it looks like. I believe that this usually I have set it to 1. So I am essentially just doing a reverse for now. As soon as it compiles, you will see. If you're looking to do any kind of magical orb effect, this is how you do it, by the way. Like this, right? There's just an inverted Fresnel. You do a Fresnel, you put a exponent that is below 1, and you do 1 minus this, absolute saturate, multiply it by a color, and you get this cool magical orb effect thingy, right? And so essentially I'm using this to do a little bit of light coming from inside of the clouds, right? What if the bottom layer is darker than the highest? Shadows might already though. I am doing that. I am actually doing that. So you can see that the vertex color, color bottom, color top are 2 different colors. So if I go here and I show you this, I am already doing a little bit of that. I can't do too much of that because then the effect breaks again. So if I do color bottom, let's say red, I get this interesting effect right here. And it still kind of works. But if I do something like this, you know, it gets trippy, but it's, you know, it works kind of. But you can, if the colors mismatch too much, you can start to see the slices again. And I'm trying to hide the slices as much as possible. But, you know, it looks kind of cool, I would say. You know, I can do stuff like this if I wanted to. You know, maybe I can get good old Scott to suggest what a good color could be. But right now I'm just using I believe something that is like a grayish blue and white. Or I'm just doing like a slight orange to do a little bit of contrast. But yeah. So today I wanted to show you fog and I wanted to show you fog of war, and I showed you both. So I would call this a success. Especially considering how tired I am. So I think this was a pretty good showing. Don't look at the stuff that is breaking. Don't look at there. So yeah. Like I said at the beginning, this is probably gonna be my last stream for a while. I had a great deal of fun making these. The archive for these streams is gonna be available up on YouTube on the Destiny Pit channel. I might stream Dice Legacy again, or let's say I will stream Dice Legacy again at some point in the future. But it's probably going to be in a different fashion, a different format. I want to do more focused streams, so probably I will stream gameplay or I will stream something different. If there's anything in particular regarding the game and regarding the technical aspects of the game that you're interested in, you can always tweet at us at Dice Legacy, or hit us up on Facebook or the comment section on YouTube, or in the Discord of Dice Legacy. We do have actually a Discord for Dice Legacy, which I am going to link into the chat right now, and I'm probably going to put in the description of the YouTube video archive. So I'm going to hit copy, and I'm going to hit paste right here. Maybe you can have a gradient mask on each layer of fog, each one a bit farther from the rock wall. Yeah, that could also work. Yes. To be honest, every time I look at these, and I look at these effects and look at what I have achieved, I'm never happy. I always see stuff that I can improve. So I might look to improve the fog even further. To me, the main, if I had to touch only one thing right now, it would be the water. But I still see, things to improve and whatnot. So yeah, I think this is gonna be it for today's stream. So let's get it back. Go back up top. My hair is all messy, so that's why I was wearing a hoodie. But I don't care today. I am grateful to have completed these 3 streams. I'm having a great deal of fun making this game. We are in a quite hectic moment in development, but I would say that things are falling in place, and the game is very fun to play, and I'm having fun making it. And I am also very grateful that very cool people showed up in the chat. People like Apilon, people like Gomi, who I haven't seen in a minute. I hope you are doing very well. And if you are watching this on YouTube, thank you. I appreciate that. Once again, if you have any questions, let me know. I don't know when I will be back, but it was fun to be back. And yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to tell you to stay safe in this crazy year. And stay awesome. Cheers!